to oppose the Tariff Act 1988 repeal bill with an air of kind of confusion. Well, yes, but confusion as to why this bill has come to this Parliament, because it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, that this is indeed, and I am in agreement with my Labor colleagues on this, this is an old agenda, and I believe it's an agenda that previous governments and indeed this government has well moved away from and are working successfully, Mr. Speaker, in terms of trade for both our importers and our exporters. And when I had a look at this brief bill, a couple of things struck me, and the first thing that struck me was that in terms of trade, this is an all bets are off type of bill. This is a New Zealand taking off its overcoat and exposing everything it has to offer to the world, whilst still dealing in trade terms, Mr. Speaker, with fully clothed opponents. And to me that didn't seem like a very good thing to do. Mr. Speaker, this Tariff Act 1988 repeal bill seems to give away any trade advantage that New Zealand has, and we are an exporting nation. Export is incredibly important to New Zealand and will continue to be. Another aspect which struck me with this bill was that previous trade ministers and our own trade minister, the Honourable Tim Grosser, are working extremely hard negotiating free trade negotiations. And in that word, negotiation really captures where New Zealand is at in terms of trade these days, which is that we engage with countries like Hong Kong and China, ASEAN countries, and we engage in negotiations which are not just about tariff rates, but are also about other aspects of trade with those countries and doing business with those countries, and they might include things like rights for workers, educational opportunities for both countries and other such things. And so tariffs may form a small part of that negotiation, but I would have thought, Mr. Speaker, that for a small country in the middle of the South Pacific, it is so very dependent on trade that forming trade relationships with other countries rather than just saying, OK, come in, won't cost you much, we'll pay tariff going into your country, I wouldn't have thought that that was a very smart move. Mr. Speaker, this Tariff Act repeal bill may work for importers, but certainly tariffs remain for exporters, and as I have said already, we are a country which relies very heavily on export. The repeal of this Tariff Act would put New Zealand at a huge disadvantage. We would open the door for tariff-free goods, and yet our exporters will still face tariffs with our trading partners. The other problem is that we would lose the protection that we currently enjoy under the Tariff Act, and that is we would have no protection from a sudden influx of goods into our country. And it has happened before. We are well aware of it. I think Chinese T-shirts or underpants come to mind. Right. Without the protection of the Tariff Act, I fear that New Zealand would be exposed, possibly the wrong word, to that kind of influx of goods with little protection. Mr. Speaker, I'm just curious, and I invite Sir Roger Douglas in his reply to explain something in this bill which I cannot make head or tail of, and that is under provision, it's a short bill luckily, 4.2, he might explain what the phrase shipment includes loading into an aircraft and to ship, and cognate expressions have corresponding meanings. Now, I cannot understand what that term means. I'm very interested to hear what Sir Roger Douglas makes of it, and I invite him to give a very clear and full explanation of that term. Mr. Speaker, I stand and strongly oppose this outdated, outmoded and damaging bill. Thank you.